Good evening. Thank you for all joining us. We have people from all over the country, so I'm very grateful for you staying up at this hour on the East Coast and coming to join us. This is a webinar on the three Supreme Court seats that are up for retention in the state of California. As the esteemed Stanford professor Larry Diamond has said repeatedly for the last 6 months, this is the set of races. The math does not work to take back the Congress or to take back the White House without Pennsylvania, period. And Mitch Kates, our executive director, is joining us, and he has pledged to me that if you send your dollars or your nickels to the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, every cent will be allocated to these races. So welcome, and Mitch, take it off.
Thank you, Michelle. I want to say a hearty thank you from us Pennsylvanians out to our friends in California, and if there are others zooming in from other parts of the country, we truly appreciate your help, your support, your well wishes, and your contributions and contributions of volunteerism too. One of the things that we say here in Pennsylvania, or I say it all the time, is unlike Las Vegas, what happens here in Pennsylvania does not stay here in Pennsylvania. And as Michelle pointed out, and the esteemed professor from Stanford said, it's all about Pennsylvania. I have the honor to introduce our special guest, one of our justices. And I will tell you that not only are we friends, but 10 years ago this year, I had the honor of managing David Wecht's campaign when he was running as a Superior Court judge, running for the Supreme Court in an election cycle in 2015, where for the first time in the history of Pennsylvania, which our Supreme Court's the oldest Supreme Court in the country, there were 3 open seats out of 7. And even though naysayers said Democrats will never get it done, we did what everybody thought we couldn't do. We swept the slate, won 3 seats on the Supreme Court, flipped the dynamics of those Supreme Courts. And as Justice Wecht will explain what's happened in those 10 years while sitting on the Supreme Court, all I can say in a nutshell is that major significant progress has happened as a result of those elections. So we'll go into some details and answer questions that you may have, because 10 years later, we are now in what we call the retention years. And we'll explain what that means as opposed to the open seat elections that we had 10 years ago. But without further ado, I want to open the floor and open the mic to my friend, our Pennsylvania Supreme Court Justice, David Wecht. David, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mitch. And my thanks to all of you on this call. You'll notice in the background, I have a view of your beautiful state, and it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm very grateful that all of you would show an interest in what's going on here in Pennsylvania. We, as Mitch indicated, have a very important set of retention races this year. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court is the oldest appellate court in North America. It goes all the way back to the colonial court, founded by William Penn, our eponymous founder, in 1684. And we're a court of 7 members. We're all elected. This is, I recognize, very different from what you have in California. In Pennsylvania, all judges at all levels are elected. I was a trial judge previously for almost 9 years. Then I was a judge on our statewide intermediate appeals court for 4 years. And as Mitch indicated, I was one of the 3 Democrats who won a seat on the Supreme Court 10 years ago. In Pennsylvania's system, judges and judicial candidates running for judicial positions run in partisan elections to be elected to the seat. And then after 10 years, if they want to continue, they must seek an additional 10-year term in what's called a retention election. It is a nonpartisan election. It was designed to be nonpartisan in every respect, merit-based and predicated on the accomplishments and integrity and ethics of the jurist involved. The superheated, overheated environment in which we all live now throughout our nation has led to this retention election in Pennsylvania becoming the focus of many activists from around the country in the wake of the Wisconsin Supreme Court election that many of you read about. Now, that was a partisan election, and it was only for one seat. This is a nonpartisan election, and it's a retention election, yes or no, not a head-to-head race, for 3 seats. Even though it's nonpartisan, again, partisan activists from all around the country are pouring in their efforts and also their financial resources in this race. The retention elections in Pennsylvania have traditionally been relatively non-controversial and generally not vigorously contested. As they say, they were not designed to be full-blown acrimonious battles. However, 20 years ago, for the first time, a justice who was a Democrat lost his retention election. There were some issues going on in Pennsylvania at the time which contributed to that, but the point is that losing a retention election is not without precedent, and a certain number of people will always approach these types of elections with a throw the bums out mentality or a naysaying orientation. Now, what I want to focus on in the short time I have with each of you is the just a few remarks to give you an idea of how the contours of Pennsylvania law have been shaped and affected in profound ways by me and my 2 colleagues, Christine Donahue and Kevin Dougherty, in the 10 years since our election in 2015. And I'll focus on 4, I'll just focus on 4, I think, particularly salient points, which I think will give you an illustrative view of what I'm talking about. Pennsylvania has a constitution that is an ancestor, not a descendant, of the United States Constitution. Pennsylvania's Constitution was written in the same year, in the same building as our nation's Declaration of Independence, 1776, Independence Hall, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And that Constitution, along with the Constitution of other early states, particularly Massachusetts and Virginia, were some of the key sources for what later became, about a dozen years later, our United States Constitution. Now, Pennsylvania's Constitution contains much that does not appear anywhere in our United States Constitution. First thing it contains that I want to mention that is nowhere in the United States Constitution is a guarantee of, quote, free and equal elections, unquote. In 2018, we heard a case called League of Women Voters. And that case caused us to interpret and apply Pennsylvania's free and equal elections clause in a case that challenged our flamboyantly gerrymandered U.S. House district map, which had since the 2010 census generated an enduring, an endurable and enduring hardwired, baked in partisan Republican advantage in the U.S. House districts at a count of 13 seats Republican to 5 seats Democrat in a state that at the time had an approximately 1 million Democratic voter registration advantage. We heard that argument, we read those briefs, and we struck down as invalid under Pennsylvania's free and equal elections clause in our Constitution that gerrymandered map, and we ordered a new map. And when our Republican-dominated General Assembly refused to supply us compliant maps, we hired your own Californian, Professor Nate Persily of Stanford Law School, perhaps the nation's leading expert on districting, to help us in drawing compliant maps. And that's what we did. And we now have fair maps in Pennsylvania. They don't guarantee a Democratic win or a Republican win. They guarantee free and equal elections as our Constitution requires. And by the way, Republican activists are hopping mad. They are hopping mad. All these years later, still about this decision, they sought to impeach us unsuccessfully after that. And their negative advertisement that's going on right now is accusing us, my colleagues and I, of creating a partisan gerrymander, which is the pot calling the kettle black. Think of a small child from whom you take away a prized toy and how they protest and whine and cry and scream. That's what we're facing here. So Exhibit A, the number one point I wanted to make, is about the gerrymandering case. Before our decision, Pennsylvania's U.S. House district map was Exhibit A nationwide in the most gerrymandered partisan map in this entire nation. Number two, in the United States Constitution, the word education appears nowhere. It cannot be found in our United States Constitution. And the United States Supreme Court has rejected attempts to have it declare that a public education is a constitutional right. It is not under the U.S. Constitution. However, thanks to William Penn, Pennsylvania's Constitution, going all the way back to 1776, guarantees all Pennsylvanians a, quote, thorough and efficient system of public education, unquote. And before the three of us were on the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, that clause had pretty much been ignored, just like our free and equal elections clause had pretty much been treated by prior Republican-dominated iterations of our state Supreme Court as a dead letter, as a non-starter, as something that could only come to life, as it were, with an affirmative legislative enactment. But in the William Penn School District case, appropriately named, we decided that the clause provides a right of action enforceable in court for persons and school districts who are denied equitable funding of their public schools and their public school districts. That was the William Penn School District case, and it has reshaped education law in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Third, another word that appears nowhere in the U.S. Constitution is the environment. In Pennsylvania's Constitution, we have and have had for over 50 years an environmental rights amendment. At the time of its passage, in connection with the thoroughgoing revision of our state constitution in the 1960s, it was unique or nearly unique in our nation. now there are many that have followed it. Our Constitution in Pennsylvania guarantees, and I quote, clean air, pure water, and the scenic values of the environment, unquote. And it creates a trust, not only for all Pennsylvanians living, but for all generations yet to come. And in a succession of cases, Justices Donahue, Dougherty, and I have vindicated that clause. We have struck down legislative enactments that impaired environmental rights, and we have ensured that the resources of Pennsylvania, the natural resources, are in trust, not only for current Pennsylvanians, but for our children and grandchildren and those who will follow them indefinitely into the future, just as our Constitution in Pennsylvania demands. And finally, the fourth example I want to give you is the is another thing that's missing from the U.S. Constitution, but very much present and alive in Pennsylvania's Constitution, and that is the Equal Rights Amendment. Now, I know none of you on this call are old enough to remember, but I'm sure you've heard or read about the failure in the 1970s of the Equal Rights Amendment to be ratified in the required amount of time by the required amount of states, and that's why it failed to become the 27th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And we, to our shame, in the United States, lack an environmental rights amendment. But for over 50 years, we in Pennsylvania have had an equal rights amendment, guaranteeing equal rights regardless of sex. This is very important. And again, it had been not vigorously or enthusiastically vindicated in the past. But in the case of Allegheny Reproductive Health Associates a couple of years ago, we vindicated that right in the following circumstance. Our state legislature had passed a law which, while authorizing Medicaid funding for male reproductive health services, had prohibited it for female reproductive health services. And we struck down that law under Pennsylvania's Equal Rights Amendment. I went on, by the way, in my concurring opinion, to point out many of the fallacies that underlie the Dobbs opinion that had recently been issued at that time by the United States Supreme Court, in case any of you would like to look it up on your own. So without taking any more of your time, I will stop there. I will say only the following: that number one, I thank you again for your interest in a state on the other side of our nation. I recognize that you understand the importance of Pennsylvania in our scheme. We're not the Keystone State for nothing. And we on the court take our role seriously. We do our work independently and collegially, and with a sense of duty and integrity and faith to our Constitution and our laws. I appreciate your interest. I appreciate your help. And I'd welcome your questions.
Okay, let's start the questions. For Mitch, is postcarding to voters part of your field operation?
Yes, we actually launched a postcarding program a couple of weeks ago. That continues to grow and ramp up. We are happy to supply lists, and my colleague Kate, who you're going to hear from in a few minutes, can certainly give you some information about that, or you can reach out to us and we can provide that information.
Another question coming in is about direct mail, Mitch. What's happening in that arena? Are you seeing a flood of opposition coming in? What's happening?
So on the other side, let's call them the bad guys. They have bombarded mailboxes with some of the most misleading mail, maybe in the history of Pennsylvania electoral politics, so much so that many newspapers around the Commonwealth have been highlighting the fact that one of the billionaires, actually the wealthiest person in Pennsylvania, Jeffrey Yaz is his name, has sunk millions of dollars into sending out mail both to Republican households and Democratic households, ironically using Democratic messaging to Democratic households to confuse voters, to actually use our messaging and spin it with a vote no message, which is remarkable and frankly flabbergasting. And a lot of the journalists that have been covering this are just absolutely floored by the audacity of their approach. There is there is direct mail from the good guy side that's been flying out and ramping up and will continue to ramp up. That certainly extols the virtues of what our justices have done, and Justice Wecht did a good job of giving you the top four. But we're communicating that both direct mail, on social media. We have a couple of TV commercials that are flying. There's a brand new one that launched just yesterday, I think, or maybe it was today. That does a very good job with all three justices standing up and giving information about what some of the rulings that they did. And that's just going to continue, because one of the things that, one of the reasons why everything is very time sensitive, as you all may be aware, Pennsylvania started to do vote by mail. The 2020 election cycle was the very first year that we did it. The good news is we dominate vote by mail, because probably the only good thing that Orange Menace has done while in office has told Republican voters that vote by mail was fraud, and they listened to him. So we dominate that. And so we spend a lot of time focusing on getting people to sign up for vote by mail and then to chase them.
Now, Justice, you've done a fantastic job of telling us the importance of these seats and the historic value of this is to America. Are there other issues that you touch on? What about health care? What about insurance? What about disaster relief? Do you weigh in on all those issues?
Yes, Michelle. So, just like your Supreme Court in California, I had the pleasure of meeting and dining with one of your Supreme Court justices a few months ago, by the way. We are the highest court in Pennsylvania, the highest court on matters of Pennsylvania law, just like your Supreme Court in California is the final word on California law. So, whether it's interpreting the Constitution of Pennsylvania, interpreting statutes passed by our state legislature, or interpreting and expounding the common law of Pennsylvania, we are the final word on that. So we have, for example, rendered a number of decisions providing very robust protection under the consumer protection statute in Pennsylvania. We have a number of cases involving the insurance laws. We don't have as many natural disasters in Pennsylvania. The price you pay for that wonderful coastline, I suppose. But we have any number of cases really in all matters under the sun. The only things really that a state Supreme Court in our nation are generally not going to deal with are going to be immigration and intellectual property, because those two are really the domains of the federal government. But we deal with basically everything else. We've rendered a number of very important decisions, for example, in the area of tort law, personal injury under Pennsylvania common law, and we've recognized the importance of the right to jury trial, which is also protected in Pennsylvania's Constitution expressly. So we believe that people can sue and vindicate their remedies in court. And in fact, Pennsylvania's Constitution actually has not only an open courts provision, but a remedies clause as well.
Thank you. And it was fascinating to hear you talk about equal rights and the Equal Rights Amendment and the Dobbs decision. Is there anything else you'd like to say on that? Our listeners are so
Well,
curious.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you, if you are junkies about the critical literature analyzing the Dobbs case, I would encourage you, although I think Netflix is probably more fun, to Google my concurrence in that Allegheny reproductive health case. I did do a deep dive in that concurring opinion into the foundations of much of Justice Alito's reasoning in Dobbs, and I think I showed some of the weaknesses and some of the infirmities of that SCOTUS decision.
Thank you so much.
Of
Now we
course.
have a question coming in which says, is there any polling data? Uh, what does polling and public mood? What's really going on in Pennsylvania right now?
Yeah. So, I, Mitch and Kate might want to weigh in. I will say this: there, to my knowledge, there have not been any publicly distributed polls. I have been shown some data from a little while ago, which tended to indicate that Republican core MAGA voters are very much motivated to vote no, and that the Democratic base voters are uninformed about this race. So, in that regard, there is a while there is a large pool of Democratic voters, they generally, at least up until our media campaign began a couple of weeks ago, they were generally uninformed, and our efforts in that regard are meant to cure that engagement gap.
What kind of dollars do you need to level the playing field, guys? What are we talking about? Mitch? Justice?
Yeah, so here's the challenge. The challenge is that money is pouring in very late. And I think that was the case in Wisconsin too, where money started to come in like within the last 2 months of the campaign. We're starting to see a ramp up in funds coming on both sides. One of the elephants in the room, I mean, quite literally, is when you have a billionaire who's worth over $65 billion like Jeffrey Yaz. He's Pennsylvania's version of Elon Musk. He has unlimited resources, and
Without
he's
without the child support obligations.
without the child support. Good catch. so so the answer to the question is there's no such thing as too much money, and we really don't know to what extent the other side's going to go to pour resources into the field. As Justice Wecht pointed out, while the MAGA voters are motivated to vote no, I think even they fear a Democratic turnout because Democratic voters are motivated. We just need to help reinforce, number one, why it's important to participate in these retention races, and also like to make sure that they understand, and that's part of what we've been doing all year long, and now that's expanding exponentially to make sure that they see that these three justices that are here did those four very salient issues, like ended gerrymandering in Pennsylvania, protected women's reproductive rights, finally, pushed a rule that was in the Constitution from the beginning about fair, distribution of education funds, and then also reinforced, our environmental clauses that Pennsylvanians have the ability to fight for clean air and water. We need to make sure that voters know those points. They're important to everybody, and that's our mission. Our mission is to talk to voters in all forms, from phones to texting to social media, to direct mail and, the commercials that are running both on TV and streaming. And it's just important to educate our voters. Because the biggest challenge, and I'll end with this, guys, on this issue, is that as David pointed out, in retention races, there's no party affiliation next to their names. Okay? That's why historically, and so it's supposed to be a nonpartisan process. And we are the victims of our own success. Back in 2015, when the naysayers said Democrats will never be successful in these statewide races, and we proved them wrong, we swept the slate. There's actually 5 seats up for retention, and they're all Democrats. So it's the perfect storm where the orange guy is on a retribution tour, as we all know. And I will point out, I don't want this to be lost, especially to our friends in California, that in 2020, there was no state that had more frivolous lawsuits from Trump and his allies than the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And my friend here on screen joining you tonight and his colleagues shot down every single one of those lawsuits. So, for a guy who is on a retribution tour, he's focused on these races, which is that much more reason why we have to be successful.
What another questions come in asking what else is on your ballot? Because in California, we have Proposition 50 on redistricting, and then we have measures around the state. And in Silicon Valley, we are the poster child with Measure A, which is a regressive sales tax, which we are trying to pass so that we don't have to close any of our public hospitals that tend to be the trauma centers for the state of California. So what else is on your ballot?
So one of the things that I say it all the time, is there is absolutely no such thing as off-year elections. We have odd year and even year elections. And in the odd year elections, those races are incredibly important. Number one, there are judicial elections every odd year. And number two, there are municipal elections too that go all the way to school board. And as we've all been witnessing all across the country, our school board races in California, they're wildly expensive, but they are hyper-partisan elections. And so, city officials from mayors and township councils and county, like we literally have thousands of candidates on the ballot. And just to put it into context, in our even years, the most candidates, I think last year we had maybe 360 across the board from our statewide to our state legislature. So there are thousands of races on the ballot. And now this race for us is the top of the ticket. But here's the other challenge that we have, my friends. Because these are retention races, these are actually found, depending on what county you're in, either at the very bottom of the ballot or on the back of the ballot at the very end. So we also need to make sure that we're pushing our voters all the way down the ballot. And that's another challenge. But quite frankly, that's why we're leading with the retention races on every communication that we're doing, to make sure that people are like, well, where are they? But we're also educating them to say, go to the bottom or go to the back.
I think this is a great segue to bring in your co-political director, Kait, to talk about phone banks, postcarding, what we're doing in the field, and how we can be involved from California or wherever we are in this country. Kait, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Just to re-up what everyone here has already said, but thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're so excited to have your help and so grateful to have you with us. At the PA Dems, we are lucky to have volunteer options virtually nearly every day of the week. We do have some special phone banks that we want to direct your attention to that are happening Tuesdays and Sundays, and these are with an auto dialer. So when you call into these, it's going to be all the more easy for you to make calls and get through to voters. Like Justice Wecht mentioned, one of our main priorities right now is making sure that Democrats and independents in the state are aware of who the Democratic candidates are on the ballot, because that won't be listed. And so calling them, letting them know what the justices stand for, what they have been fighting for in the last decade, and what it means to retain them this year is very important. And these calls will be around 10 o'clock in the morning your time to about noon or 1 p.m. your time, depending on when they start. And so I'm happy to be in contact with anyone. My email is kait@padems.org. If none of these times work, like I mentioned, we do have traditional phone banks running other times, other days of the week. Our friends at the DNC will also be stepping in to provide dialers on other days of the week. Please stay tuned for that. We'll be happy to send you those links as well. As far as postcarding goes, yes, we have just started, like Mitch mentioned, a robust postcarding program in Pennsylvania. If anyone here is interested in helping out with some other postcarding opportunities in the near future, once again, my email is kait@padems.org. Please reach out. I'll make sure to keep you posted as we continue sending postcards to our neighbors and fellow voters. And one final thing I'd like to remind folks is if anyone is planning to come in person or knows folks who are in person or are able to get on the ground in Pennsylvania, we would love to welcome you to volunteer with us. That's another thing you can email me about. Right now, we're working on fleshing out some details to help people who are planning to travel into the state, sending them to some incredible volunteer opportunities. And please, again, reach out to me. I'll be happy to set up a time to talk with you or your group and make sure that we can plug you into our volunteer.
And Kate, thank you, because we do have people coming and they have been in touch and they are going to be walking and knocking on doors.
And I would be remiss if I didn't point out to our friends in California that it is fall foliage season. And so not only are you doing the Lord's work of communicating to voters and giving them information, but you also get a chance to see some beautiful, the Keystone State of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has some lovely foliage during this time of the year too. And one of the things that I just wanted to kind of reiterate regarding our auto dialers and all that. I know there's a lot of seasoned veterans who have done a lot of phone banks and used auto dialers. We are working, the programs that we work with are, Scale to Win is one of the programs that we're working with. Both the DNC and our allies, our friends at Turn PA Blue, use Scale to Win. So I know a lot of you are familiar with that and like using that.
Indeed. And I have to thank our hosts, the PDC, the Peninsula Democratic Coalition, and the Democratic Volunteer Center, and really thank our chair, Pam Salvatierra, if I said it right, darn. Thank you for making this happen. And Justice, do you want to close?
Just to say thank you to Michelle and to all the organizers of this wonderful call. I'm deeply grateful, as are my colleagues Christine Donahue and Kevin Doherty. We aim to serve our nation, our state, the people. We have 13 million Pennsylvanians, so we're a lot smaller than California, but we're still pretty big. We're the fifth biggest state. And as you all know on this call, as well as I do, we are the largest swing state in our nation. So we recognize that this election has consequences for the future, not just of Pennsylvania, but the future of our country. Thank you all very much.
And Mitch, as we go away, tell us when the polls are coming. We are hungry for data.
Yeah, well, as we get information, Michelle, you and I talk all the time. I will feed that information to you guys. But at the end of the day, we just all have to like put our pedal to the metal. One of the things that I often say is that there's no such thing as an election day in Pennsylvania anymore, not since 2020. There's an election period. As soon as ballots start hitting kitchen tables, it's election day. And it's election day in Pennsylvania every day until the very last day to vote, which is the first Tuesday in November. So the timing is as we say, I'm originally from Boston, you guys, so it's wicked tight, and so we have to work fast. We appreciate the fact that you all joined us tonight. We can use the help tomorrow, right? There's a lot of work to do. As the justice pointed out, there's a lot of Pennsylvanians in this Commonwealth. We know that this is going to be a low information, how that phrase, low information voters. So the sooner we talk to a voter, the sooner we educate them, the sooner we can earn their vote. Right now we're still building out our vote by mail acquisition list of people to sign up and get their ballot by mail. And quickly it's going to turn into a vote by mail chase program. And so all of those things are happening literally every single day until the first Tuesday in November. So there's a lot of work to do. There's no such thing as too many people helping. We are super grateful. I am super grateful. My colleagues are super grateful. The other justices who couldn't be with us tonight are super grateful. They're all literally right now, they're in different events all over the Commonwealth. I crisscrossed the state, and our state party chair was going into Harrisburg. I was there earlier today, and I think David, I think Kevin, Justice Doherty was going to be in Harrisburg tonight. So there's a lot of things happening, folks. Again, there's no way we could thank you enough and appreciate all of your support. And P.S. and by the way, we're pushing for you guys too in California. You are doing some serious work too. So thank you for all of that. We're in this together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We want to keep this short, informational, and we say good night.